Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the next part of the Flame of Xulta set review. It's taking a while because there's a lot going on, but I'm trying to catch up, so hope you guys are still sticking with me here. So yeah, today we're gonna talk about the Justice cards. Before we do, hit the subscription button down below to not miss out on the rest of the series, and now let's dive in. Alright, so first we have the Justice emblem. This is one of the better emblems in a way, since flying is just pretty good, especially in more proactive decks. Having evasion is nice. It only has 1 health, so it dies to snowballs and stuff, making it a bit fragile. But yeah, it's an evasive unit, so how bad can it really be? And if you have some weapons in your deck, you can even take more advantage of it. So it's at least like in the middle of the emblems. By now I might say that the time one might be the best because it has like the highest ceiling, and then the next one might already be the Justice, or it's like close to the second one, somewhere around second or third probably. Yeah, it's just really good card in any format that it's legal in, really, including limited. Then we have Draw Strength. This card's kind of a bad Finest Hour that's dependent on your opponent having units, making it awkward if you're playing against a very unit-light deck. It has Decimate, which makes it a Decimate enabler for certain things like Zortan Paladin stuff with Decimate where that matters. And the Decimate ability is okay, it's nothing exciting, but it's basically a war cry on like the next 3 units on top of your deck, which is decent. And as long as the trick at least lets your unit win combat, it does enough. So, but yeah, if your opponent doesn't have any units, the card is kind of awkward. Might be an okay niche playable in Expedition. I think in Throne it's too weak. In Limited, however, it seems pretty decent all in all, because there will always be a fair share of units on both sides usually. Next we have Ghostblade Outkast. 1/1 Lifesteal Exalted means this turns into a neat lifesteal weapon. In Limited, if you have ways to buff this gets pretty strong pretty quickly, and even without just turning like your best unit into a lifestealer can be really powerful. In Throne, this is probably a bit too weak and gimmicky even if you try to build around it. In Expedition, however, this might be interesting with some ways to buff it. Maybe the 7-drop with Shift 3 that has the Oathbook ability, or actual Oathbook, which I think is also legal in Expedition, I'm not sure. I think actual Oathbook is not legal, but we have the Oathbook imitation. So yeah, this actually gets pretty interesting with sort of permanent buffs like from the 7-drop Xulta shift unit. So maybe there's some niche playability there, but it's not super strong. Next we have Inflict Conscience. When the cursed unit deals damage, kill it. So this is basically a neat sort of conditional removal that lets the unit deal damage once. Either you jump block it and take 0 damage and it just deals damage to the unit and it dies, or you take damage from the unit once and then it dies. It's very cheap, so in Throne you probably don't need it because there's enough good removal, but in Expedition this seemed like a pretty nice way to round out your early removal suit, and taking some damage from an early unit like 2 or 3 seems like a fine trade-off to kill it for 1 power. Plus there are like some curse synergies, like the Felon choice that the new Felon choice that kills something with a curse and gets the curse back and stuff like that. So all in all, a pretty solid role player in Limited and Expedition. Then we have Prancing Griffin. This is basically a limited only card. It's a 1-cost 1/1 flying Griffin that 1 summon gives another unit flying this turn. Nothing fancy. Even in Limited I think this is pretty weak, so not very excited about it, but in certain Limited decks it can be okay, especially if you have a bunch of weapons. And we have Press the Advantage, the Justice Oni bargain card. One of the weaker ones I think, simply because it's not fast, and giving Aegis as non-fast spell is not that great, and you also need to hit the enemy player with 2 or more Oni to play it for free from the market, which is not that great, and it's not a very helpful market slot otherwise. So yeah, pretty underwhelming in any format, honestly. Then we have Shenra. This is one of the staples of the set for all formats really. In Limited it's obnoxious, in Expedition it's really strong, and even in Throne it looks great. The main challenge in Throne will be to find a good enough deck that wants the card, but the card in and of itself is super powerful. It's immune to opposing curses. You can still buff it with spells to mastery faster, or like punish attempted free blocks to not take 2 damage from the opponent. Just a really powerful 1-drop, very pushed. Then we have the Justice Edict. It silences, and if the unit is fire or shadow, it kills it. Might be an okay market card, mainly in Throne, I think, since in Expedition, fire and shadow don't seem that strong right now, to a point where Edict does enough. But even in Throne I'm not too excited, especially because if as just a silence it's pretty weak, and even as a removal there are a lot of good options, so you usually don't need to end up playing this. So yeah, this card kind of misses the mark in a game without sideboard, I think. Next we have Hanaka Loremaster, a much needed good 2-drop for Oni decks, making Onis more viable. Unfortunately, I think they're not quite viable still, neither in Throne nor in Expedition, but it's a pretty solid card if you are in Oni. If you have a 1-drop by turn 2, this will be a 2/2 for 2, which is not exciting, but the turn you attack, this is often like a 3/3 or sometimes even a 4/4, and then the Mastery gives you some additional nice value. So all in all, a pretty sweet 2-drop in the right deck. In Limited, if you have enough Oni, it looks pretty good. It should be a 2/2 on average at the very least to be put in your deck, and you probably also want a relic weapon for the Mastery to be worth running Loremaster. Then we have the Justice Evangel. 2/2 lifesteal is decent, especially in Justice where you have weapons and yeah, combat tricks and stuff to buff it, and it also helps with heavy costs. It's also a paladin, which is a nice bonus. Still skeptical that it is a reasonable consideration even in Expedition, but it's a card to at least keep in mind, and that can sort of fill a role sometimes in very specific constructed cases, and in Limited it's a really sweet 2-drop. Then we have Lay Siege. 2-power fast spell, ready your units and they get endurance and invulnerability to damage this turn. So yeah, basically a one-off market card if you ask me, but kind of a nice blowout. It punishes stuns like permafrost and stuff like that, counters crystallize, and can really blow out the opponent in combat. So it's an interesting tool to exist as a market card basically, but that's about it. And in Limited, this is an even stronger trick because it's a legendary, so it's kind of hard to anticipate and play around all the time. So it's much easier to get people with this. Then we have Stand Strong. You give a unit +3/+3 and Exalted this turn. Yeah, it's not fast, so it's basically just making the opponent jump block usually, or take damage for 1 turn. Card seems pretty weak. If you have a way to like let the unit die without losing much value, this could be interesting, but even in Limited I'm not a big fan of this, so I think the card's pretty bad all around. Seems like a trap. Then we have Zortan Paladin, mostly just a Limited 2-drop. It's a Paladin, which is a bonus, but not worth it in Constructed really to yeah, run this kind of Paladin, even if you're into Paladins. Then we have Crowd Queller. It's just a pretty weak relic weapon for Limited only, and even in Limited it isn't that great. The Flash Grenade gives you kind of a nice free attack and might allow you to kill something cheap for free on the first attack, but it's just a pretty weak and situational card. And last but not least for part 1, we have Forgemark Scrivener. It's a 3-cost 2/3 Oni. With Mastery 2 you put a +1/+2 weapon on one of your other Oni, so you have to have a lot of Oni. And yeah, on Mastery 6 you put a +1/+2 weapon on each of your Oni. yeah, too many better 3-drop Onis in Constructed for this to be an option. In Limited, however, if you have enough Oni, it seems like an okay 3-drop, basically. Alright, that's it for part 1 of the Justice cards. I'll be right back in a moment with the other half. Stay tuned.